Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Trachis, and I'm K-5 Math Program Facilitator in Washoe County. I'm also currently teaching 7th grade at Vaughn Middle School in Reno. And with us today, we also have Dr. Stephanie Vega. She's the K-5 Math Program. Oh, sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Let me work on that real quick. She is a kindergarten teacher at Maxwell Elementary. So just some housekeeping. We do have a Padlet for you. So all the handouts, additional resources, links to apps are located on that Padlet. We will also be putting that link in the chat for you. So today we're going to look at 3 different ideas: the early number trajectories, associated nuanced behaviors that relate to counting that align with those trajectories, and also look at both manipulatives and tools and online manipulatives and tools. All right, so in the link that Stephanie's putting in the chat, there's a Jamboard. Will you go ahead and engage with everything a child needs to know about the number 6?
Hey, Denise and/or Stephanie, we do not have the link, just an FYI.
Sorry, it bounced me out and I'm just getting the link back on.
No worries. Thanks, all.
And there is that link now.
It says I need access.
Oh,
View only.
well, we're teachers and we know how to deal with this. I'm not too sure why that's happening, but what we'll go ahead and do is if we could just have you put in the chat, what is everything a student needs to know about the number 6? And Stephanie, if you could read some of those for me.
Sure. So we have shape, quantity, sequence, how to represent the number with objects. That 6 is 1 more than 5. It represents a quantity. Build, identify, count up to, make. 6 is half a dozen. It looks like an upside down 9. 1 to 1, even number, how many objects it represents, how it's formed or how you write it, how to count it, how to show it, where it fits in the number sequence, what numbers become before and after 6.
Wonderful ideas. There's so many understandings that students need to have about the number 6. And we're going to look at several of those today. So as I flashed a number, what you probably noticed is you immediately recognize that's the number 3, I'll flash another one. You probably immediately recognize that's the number 4. And so there's some ideas that come actually before learning to count, and that's subitizing. In this case, being able to identify numbers, identify the numbers 3 or 4, or even in some cases 5, students are able to do that immediately. And that's perceptual subitizing. A second type of subitizing is this one. And in this case, you probably recognize immediately that's a 4, but you also could see the parts of it, 3 and the 1. And that's conceptual subitizing. And I do have this slide in the Padlet as well. With conceptual subitizing, it's when students just know that that's a 4, but they also see that it's made of a 3 and a 1. And so it's a bit of an advanced feature of subitizing. And again, as students are learning to count, it's not as simple as it seems because they're also building the foundations of number. Another idea that students have is this idea of comparing sets. So students might automatically recognize that one set is bigger than another. Students might actually need to compare the items in the set directly by moving them. Oftentimes, I see my early learners that line them up, and they begin to set this idea that, oh, this is more because there's some left over. If you think about this, this is huge for understanding equal groups with multiplication and division, working with number line later on. And so if you've taught the upper grades, you could see where these ideas of subitizing and comparisons are huge. So if I go back to that, what we're looking at is this first trajectory, and this is really by the work of Doug Clements. And I'll zoom in on that for you so that you don't have to go between the Padlet and the screen. So you'll see that subitizing and that comparison really does precede that counting. And so students need access to both in our whether they're in a 48-month-old pre-K, 60-month, or if they're in kinder or first, that they need access to these ideas. You'll also see on the bottom there the spatial relationship. And oftentimes we see this as dots, right? So dot patterns, dot plates, any of these pattern set recognition. So dominoes, dice have all of these. And so it provides an opportunity for students to subitize. It also provides some early access to counting with non-movable objects, which is actually more advanced than being able to count objects that are movable. And then also corresponding. Last year in Stephanie's class, I saw a child, I'll call him Dante, and she had these pattern sets out, and she also had a tree. And so he was taking the Unifix cubes out of the bucket, putting it on the pattern set, and then he would move it to the tree. And then he would flip another card and do the same. And so as he was learning that count sequence, that no numbers 1, 2, 3, he was also learning to just correspond objects to these pattern sets and then move that onto the tree. Stephanie, do you want to add anything about what Dante was doing?
I think you summed that up. He was using the spatial relationships to determine how many to put on the board.
Absolutely. And so even though this kindergartner came in without knowing that no number sequence, these were ways that Stephanie was able to differentiate for him right in the moment. And then comparing, right? Like I could take 2 pattern sets and compare which one has more, which one has less. And again, give students an opportunity to put those Unifix cubes on the pattern set. And then if they need to do the direct comparisons, they can. And so just one tool. So another trajectory we want to work with is this counting milestones. And so all of these are aspects of how students actually engage with counting over time. If you would, in the chat, just quickly take about a minute to look at each of these and put the letter that corresponds to what order you think that students develop these and build that counting progression. Excellent. So many ideas I see, starting with E, starting with C, some starting with A. And I did put a slide in the Padlet with this as well, I believe. If I didn't, I'll make sure I add it at the end of the session. So we've looked at one trajectory. Now we're bringing in the second one that pertains specifically to counting. And now this is the third. And the third is really from the work, and I'll stop sharing for a minute so that you could see. And it's really from Context for Learning Mathematics, primarily Martin Dolch and Kathy Tuolumne-Fosno worked on this with Nina Liu. And so with this, within this, you'll see this next trajectory. And this is my favorite for really looking at counting contexts. And so what you'll see is that idea of subitizing is right here at the bottom. Oops. And so when I look at this idea of subitizing, it's that, again, that foundation. But you'll notice that there's three ideas. We're primarily going to be looking at the rectangles. These rectangles here are the strategies. So you've got the ovals that are the big ideas, the rectangles that are the strategies, and then anything with a triangle as a model. And so as we look at this, you'll see counting. And just to describe what this counting is this counting right here is those number words. And so it's the known number sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is something that needs to be taught. Students don't come in knowing that. That's not part of our biology. That is something that needs to be taught, is that known number sequence. So let's go ahead and jump in to a student, and let's look at, this is actually a student who has not yet hit that 48 month mark. And so she would be a pre-K, but what mathematics ideas is she developing? Can you show me three? What's next? Let's see how many you have if you put some.
Denise, it sounds like somebody cannot hear the sound in the video.
Oh, goodness. That is interesting. Well, let's go ahead and we'll replay it one more time, just because it's always good to watch these students. We don't get this opportunity when we're in the classroom. So let me Just make sure that when I share again.
Yes, Denise, when you share again, make sure you hit the share sound button. It's in the far left corner.
Yes. Did you not hear it either, Mary?
No, I thought it was just a me problem.
Okay. No, that's so good. Thank you. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and share that again.
All right, can you show me 3?
Can everyone hear now?
Yes.
Yep.
1. Okay, what's next?
This one.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
One on anyone like here.
Yeah. Let's see.
One on here. One on there.
Okay, let's see how many you have if you put some in there.
This one.
Sure.
Now this one.
Okay. How many cubes are on there?
1,
Mm-hmm.
2, 3. This one.
Yeah.
And D.
So let's do it together. 1. Put your finger on this one.
1,
2.
2.
This one.
This 2.
That's 2.
Yes.
Okay, what's next?
4.
4. And what's?
2.
All right, so real quick, let's go ahead and look at this trajectory. What do you notice this child has? What is she able to do? What does she seem to understand in regards to counting? Yeah, so see, touch each cube, some sequencing, some recall of numbers. She could count to 3 by touching the cubes. I see someone says some 1 to 1, some counting. Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at this trajectory here and we look at it, we see that she has some of that known number sequence, right? So she's able to do 1, 2, in some cases 3. She skips over numbers, yet still they are increasing. So she moves to 4 to 6. And then we see that at some point she goes back to 2. And so we definitely see that she has this 1-to-1 tagging. Every cube she touches it one time, right? So she's got some of that 1-to-1 tagging. Sometimes with 1-to-1 tagging, we will see a student double count a cube or skip a count, right? We also see synchrony. And so synchrony is where you have some sort of word for every cube you count. Sometimes we see students just name things different things. So they'll go 1, 2, and then be like red, green, yellow, right? So they know that there needs to be something said when they touch a cube, but they just don't know maybe, again, that known number sequence. So again, here's that known number sequence, the order that those numbers are set in, and then that 1-to-1 tagging and synchrony. They do not have one-to-one correspondence until they are able to touch a cube or touch an object and say the correct number word, right? And so one-to-one correspondence, if she would have counted all 5 of those cubes, she would have been able to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then that would be one-to-one correspondence. And so she might have tagging, she might have synchrony, she might have some tagging and synchrony together, but she doesn't have the correspondence until that known number with that object is in that sequential order. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's look at another. So a pre-counter really identifies objects. They don't associate a number word with a quantity. And so in this case, we see that this child, she's able to identify objects. She does have some number with a quantity. And that moves into that next one, which is that reciter, where you use number words, but not always in that correct sequence, which I definitely think we saw this child do. They might use more words than objects or skip over words and objects. And so that reciter, that's with the synchrony and the tagging both. Okay. So let's go ahead and watch her again with another task.
Mommy, that's again.
Can you show me 4
Yes.
with these?
Yes.
Can you put them on there? Can you put 4?
Yes. 1,
Mm-hmm.
2,
Mm-hmm.
3,
Mm-hmm.
4,
Mm-hmm.
6,
Denise, you're muted.
That is so strange. I don't see me muted on the screen. Okay. As we see is she's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and then she skips to 6. So we definitely see some evidence of one-to-one correspondence to 4. And then she loses that count sequence. So when we look at this, the tool that she was using in there is the 5-frame. And I know many of you are familiar with those 5 frames. So sometimes there's benefit. So if you have a child who struggles with keeping track and staying organized, and we see that right here on the landscape, sometimes bringing in that 5-frame or bringing in that 10-frame and asking them to choose a tool and show the count on that is extremely helpful. Other times you might just want to see if they are able to count. Stephanie, do you want to add anything to that?
No?
All right, perfect. So sometimes when I'm working, so this is a child actually in a Nevada school, and I'm going to ask him to count. And so one of my favorite things to do with this range of early counters is to provide them a set and then have them count from the set. The reason why is when they pull a cube out of the bowl and they place it on the ground, they say the number word 1, but they're only seeing 1 cube. And then they could pull a cube out, place 2, and they're seeing 2 cubes. In this case, I just gave this child a bin of Unifix cubes. So it was a large bin. And I just said, can you count? I was going to start clarifying myself, and the child started counting. And so I just did what good teachers do. And sometimes we just have to be quiet and let them do their thing. So let's go ahead and watch this child. Do you know what these are? Ooh, can you take them out and count them for me? How many?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, wow. How many did you have there?
10.
10. You knew you had 10. It's a little bit of a cringe there when you hear yourself working with kids. All right, using this landscape, let's go ahead and if you would put in the chat, what do you notice that this child has? What did you notice that this child has? Yeah, we definitely see that one-to-one correspondence. I noticed that cardinality is in there as well. He didn't have to recount how many he had, right? Yeah, organization by color. And that really surprised me that this child made multiple decisions. He made the decision to only collect red cubes and count red cubes. He also made the decision to stop himself at 10, which also told me quite a bit about how he's reasoning about number. And this was about the 3rd week of kindergarten, right? And so I'm really happy with that, to see a kindergartner come in with all of those skills. Beautiful that again, that organization. And so when we think about the nuanced pieces, we think about the fact that a child has to learn those number words. They have to be able to understand that when we're counting objects, we're naming it with a number. We're not naming it red. We're not naming it green. We're not naming it a cube or a pen or all these different ideas that are within their range as an early learner, that now I have to give this object something else. I'm labeling it almost again. Now, children who are truly understanding number and this idea that when I'm counting, I'm really describing the set. So that's why as that child was counting and he said 1, he saw 1, because that 1 is not describing that object, it's describing the set of objects. And that is the piece that's extremely difficult for our early learners, is understanding that I'm not just relabeling this object with a number word, that I'm actually describing the set. And that's a piece of our practice that sometimes I think that, at least for myself, that I could do better when working with early learners, is making sure that when they say 4, I'm pointing to all 4, or we're talking about all 4. I also think sometimes when we ask them to count things that are already put in an order and organized for them, that sometimes just that might lead to this misconception that I'm just labeling that item with that number. And that's that ordinal number sequence, right? Like this is the first, this is the second, this is the third. But really, when we're counting, we're saying this is a set of 1, this is a mathematical set of 2, this is a mathematical set of 3. And that piece is going to completely change the way their brain processes number. I just read a study last night about infants at 5 months old and how they're able to think about quantity and number. If I can, I'll go ahead and add that to our Padlet as well, because it's quite fascinating to see that our brains have these capacities built in, but sometimes it's how we engage with them, whether we create those neuro pathways or not. We do definitely know that students, early learners with trauma, there's some great research out of Harvard, early learners that come with trauma, that we know their ability to build those neural pathways is impacted as well, right? So things that we need to consider as practitioners in the classroom every day. And so, yeah, so we definitely saw that this child he knew the number words at least to 10. He had the one-to-one tagging with the one-to-one synchrony. So he did have that one-to-one correspondence. And then what opened up for him is this idea of cardinality. And if I was to build this landscape, and I actually think I'll do it now, is usually what I do is I move cardinality from over here and I place cardinality right here. One misconception I have found working with educators, not only in Northern Nevada, but also in other areas, is that sometimes we believe cardinality is just when they could answer how many, and they need to have an accurate count. So if they don't have an accurate count and they count 13, but really there was 14, then they don't have that cardinality. They need to have that one-to-one correspondence for them to actually make it to that cardinality. And so cardinality really is when I have an accurate count, and then I'm able to tell you how many without counting. And such beautiful ideas I saw in the chat that talked about those two pieces, right? That he didn't have to go back and recount, that he was immediately able to recall. I think what also supported him in being able to do that is the fact that he chose when to stop, right? He stopped at 10. And so he was making that choice of what he was going to count to. And so again, just a small instructional move that we could use to support students thinking and reasoning in the classroom. Just want to pause for a minute. Any questions on any pieces of this landscape? All right, 7 minutes. I've got 7 minutes. So let me just go ahead and
Denise, could you clarify the difference between counting and counting on?
Sure, absolutely. And so counting, and that's thank you. So counting is when we're actually counting and describing that set with numbers, right? Counting on is when I'm able to hold a number in my head and begin with that number and count beyond it. So for example, I might actually, let me just go ahead and do this. I might have, all right. And just to make sure, is everyone seeing a 5 frame?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let me go ahead and fill that 5 frame. And so I might have filled this 5 frame and I have one extra. And so I might recognize that that is the structure of 5. I might know that that's 5. I've worked with the 5 frame. I know that that's 5. And so instead of counting all from 1, I count on. And so that's 5. I know that's 5 and one more is 6. Yeah, so that would be counting on, is just recognizing that initial number and being able to add to it. And counting on really comes into play in first grade in our standards, right? So a student who is a direct modeler will go ahead and still count all. A student who's moved to that counting strategies to that will be actually able to recognize that's 5 and count on one more 6.
Thank you.
And this is one of those tools. This is a tool by the Math Learning Center. And I think there's a place that we could use these. What I love about this tool is you could see, I could choose different types of things to count. I've got multiple 5 and 10 frames. I can move beyond 10 into a 20 frame if I wanted to. I could also pull out the hide. And so I could say, let me get rid of this little friend. I could say, oh, look, I have 5. Oh, I covered some. How many do I have? I could click to reveal, click to hide again. And so if you do have some sort of projector in your classrooms, this is a great one to use to engage early learners in a whole class discussion. I love when they come up and they click the reveal. I could also put individual counters out here and they could fill the 5 or 10 frame, right? And so just lots of different ways to make this interactive and have a whole class discussion. I still like in our early childhood classrooms, I still like anchor charts and calendars and tools that are up throughout the day as well, so that students during center time could explore those in a hands-on way, yet using tools such as this app from Math Learning Center is really helpful. And so again, this one is called Number Frames. They also have the number rack. And again, what's beautiful about this is you could slide. And so one thing I've done in Stephanie's classroom is I watched her kids be able to make a number and maybe making 7 where they slide one by one, but then we ask them, okay, can you make 7 with less slides? And so then within one lesson last year, I saw her kids be able to make a 5 and count a 6 and a 7. Some kids were able to actually recognize the 7 as a 5 and 2 already at the beginning of kindergarten, which I was quite impressed by. Again, you have the same thing. So you could use the hiding. You could make that bigger if you need to hide more. The other lovely piece about this is if you're a first grade teacher, is you could add more to this rack, right? So I could add 3, I could add 4, I could add 5, right? I could keep adding as I engage with numbers. And so if I'm working with fluency to 20, it might be I want less. But if I'm working with adding a 10 to another number, that would be a great place for me to use this. And so really, we can move across those. And I hate to do this, but I'm looking at our time and I'm sure you might have some questions. Any questions?
While y'all are thinking of questions, I highly suggest putting them in the chat because we only have 2 minutes left. I'm going to do this really quickly. Just a couple of reminders while you're thinking of those. Don't forget to do the attendance survey. We also have a session survey. This is the learning to count session. Unfortunately, I didn't put it in the chat. My apologies. But also a quick reminder, the lunch break / keynote speaker starts at 12:10. I believe that link is on the conference hub page in Canvas. Please feel free to join us for that. Bring your lunch.